It's after midnight, and it's time for conversations about love, family, friends, sex, and life. It's Love and Life with Carol Riddick and Donovan West, only on WURD, Progressive Black Talk Media.
Well, hello there, family. Welcome to yet another episode of Love and Life on WURD, Progressive Black Talk Media, on air and online at wordradio.com. That's WURDradio.com. So, for those of you who are unaware, my partner in crime, Mr. Donovan West, none other than Donovan West, is on a short hiatus, but you know, he sends all of his love to each and every one of you, as always. And I too am sending my love to you, as you know I do. You know, I like to check in every episode. I like to know how you're doing. I like to let you know that I'm keeping you all in prayer because there's so much going on. As a matter of fact, I am making the statement. I am sending you all hugs, love, and prayers. That's to each and every one of you, because we are in the midst of so much. And I know you know what I mean when I say that. There's so much going on, so much going on. And I would be terribly remiss, you know, if I did not share that with you and say to you that I do care. And while we're on the subject of my expression of how much I care, I express my condolences to the family of the Temple University officer whose life was taken. My condolences to his entire family and to the families of the victims of all of the gun violence taking place in our beautiful city. Just know that we are out here praying for you, and I am sending love. So I won't talk to you too much because you know I can. You know I care about you, so you know I can talk with you all day. In any event, as they say, not all superheroes wear capes. Well, today's guest is just that. She is a superhero, okay? So for the past 13 years, she's been advocating for and working with homeless and runaway youth, as well as those who are survivors of human trafficking. She currently oversees Covenant House PA's street outreach as the associate programming director, and she's here to educate us and to share with us about this topic that I personally believe is not discussed enough. Family, I invite you to meet Natalie Proud. Hello there, beautiful. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I will not complain. I will not. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for coming to spend some time with us. And I'm going to say thank you now for all of the information that I know you will share with us. I cannot express to you how much this topic means to me, because I just believe we don't talk about it enough. I just believe we don't know enough. We don't know enough. We're not educated enough about it. So thank you for coming to share some time with us. Like I said to our family members, I'm going to be quiet. I'm not going to talk too much. Please tell us a little bit about you.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. I am coming here from Covenant House. I'm actually in Kensington right now, which most people don't know is kind of the epicenter of like overt out in the air trafficking in Philadelphia. I've been doing this work 13 years, like you said. It's actually kind of a funny story. I was working at a mechanics as a receptionist before this, and I was in grad school at Temple, and I was looking for an internship, and one of my classmates had said that Covenant House was looking to like kind of really upstart some human trafficking research and outreach, and I had always kind of wanted to help people, but I never had like, the job experience to apply for, social service jobs. So I applied as an intern. And then once I, saw how Covenant House's mission operated and like how directly they were affecting like the trajectory of people's lives, I could not go back to like working as a receptionist. So I got a full-time position as a case manager, and then through the past like 13 years, I've worked my way up. So now I'm the associate program director, like you said, and Covenant House, Pennsylvania serves homeless, runaway, and trafficked youth under the age of 21. And yes, that involves minors. And yes, that involves any gender, any race, any religion, any creed. The only thing that we ask is that we know that you're 21 and under and that you are experiencing homelessness. And that does not look just like street homelessness. That could have nowhere permanent for you to stay, sleeping in bus stops. Young people present very differently than adult chronic people when they're experiencing homelessness.
When you say that, what do you mean exactly? They present differently.
So a lot of times when we see, like in Philadelphia particularly, we see like chronically street homeless people like living in encampments or living on the street and sleeping over like heated vents. Young people don't present that way when they're experiencing homelessness for couple reasons. One, they haven't exhausted all their resources, right? Most people are willing to help young people still. When we think about it, 21 is actually super young. Also, they're not so far gone in lack of mental health treatment or so far in addiction that they actually can't function, just for purely from a standpoint of like the progression of a disease, right? And then third, they usually have a lot more because they haven't been street homeless or at all or ever, we're not that long. Their clothes are still what everyone else is wearing, right? They have nice shoes, they go to school, all of these things that young people do. Like one thing we say from Covenant House is like young people experiencing homelessness are like every other young person. So whether an 18-year-old is living at home with their parents, living with roommates in a dorm, or living in a Covenant House, they're all 18-year-olds. Does not matter where they live. So they like the same things. They want to do the same things. They care about their appearance. They care about their peers, right? And so it's not as typically overt to spot a young person experiencing homelessness as it would be to an older person that's chronically street homeless.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So what does a typical day for you look like?
I smirk because there's no typical day. But in an ideal typical day, our outreach team would pack lunches and foods and snacks and, cold drinks and just go around the city canvassing to raise awareness about Covenant House and about trafficking and youth homelessness, and then try to get young people into shelter. Now, the reason I kind of smirk when you say that, well, what's a typical day? When you're dealing with someone's direct livelihood, the decisions that we make every day as an outreach team actually affect someone's life, right? Like I'm in my office now, I can go home after this, right? If I make a decision or I help or we help or not help someone, that directly impacts their immediate life. So we could have every intention of going out and trying to get, raise awareness with 50 people. And then we see a young person who wants to come into shelter but needs detox first. Our whole day is now rerouted, right? We're going to go immediately to detox. We're going to stay with that person until they're cleared medically. And if they're not going to be cleared medically that day, then we'll go back to the office and wait, and then we'll pick them up and bring them into shelter. If we're talking about trafficking victims, there is about a 30-second to 1 minute window in which someone has a safe space to make a decision to leave that can actually leave their trafficker safely before they may not have that luxury anymore. So we can't tell a trafficking victim or a homeless young person like, oh, we'll come back tomorrow. Their decision, their whole life's going to be different tomorrow.
I have so many questions for you, Natalie. I'm like bursting right now. But so you said Kensington is basically like an epicenter. How or why? Like, how did that? It may not be. You may not be able to answer that specifically, but why do we believe it is, or how did it become that way, Kensington?
So there's a strong correlation between opiate addiction and trafficking victims and survivors. Okay. So in Kensington, it's pretty much an open air street market where opiates are served, used, dealt every 5 seconds. Probably even more. That's just like a little, slang. But there's also has been for years what people would call, street level prostitution happening in Kensington too. So they called it that when they didn't know it was trafficking, right? So along the avenue, along side streets, along anything, people are just coming in all day to buy people, to buy drugs, and it just creates this center for all these like deplorable things to happen. And so that's why I think, like I say, it's the epicenter. Now, that does not mean that trafficking doesn't happen everywhere in the city of Philadelphia. It does. In restaurants, massage parlors, hair salons, nail salons, any kind of farm workers, migrant workers, land workers, construction, contractors, landscaping. I've heard of like the craziest things throughout my time here how people have been trafficked. It's just that one is more inside, right? Or invisible. Whereas in Kensington, like it's just right in front of your face.
So how big of an issue is human trafficking in Philadelphia and the tri-state area?
So it's hard to report on actual numbers of trafficking instances because it's the number one most underreported crime ever. It has outweighed arms and drug dealing in terms of like black market drugs. And as horrible as this sounds, and I don't mean this, but like people can be used over and over again, which is like where a gun or a drug, right? Once it's used, you have to replenish somehow. But unfortunately, people can be used over and over again. So it became the number one black market crime. The other thing is it's underreported, it's underbelieved, right? So oftentimes we're dealing with people or victims who go to police or law enforcement and just aren't treated as if they were a victim of a crime. They're treated as a criminal. And we can see that progression in Kensington over time. When I first started, a lot of the people working the Ave were, arrested and sent to jail and, whatever. And then over time, Covenant House and other partners that we have, like the Salvation Army, New Day to Stop Trafficking, and Support Center for Child Advocates have really been able to teach the police, like, these people are actually victims of crimes and not actually the criminal. And so now in Kensington, you'll see the shift where police are mostly targeting like people coming in to buy sex or the traffickers or, what people call pimps.
I want to go back to something you said. You were naming like different professions and different like just everyday areas of life, and you were talking about how people are trafficked in those lines of work. Like in what ways? How is that possible?
It's possible because I don't mean to sound insensitive. People want to make money and they want to use people to make money. So for example, sex trafficking is something used in exchange for commercial sex act using force, fraud, or coercion. So something of value can be money to me, but can be sneakers to someone else, can be a cell phone bill to someone else. It's specifically something of value and not necessarily money, because as long as it's coerced, fraudulent, or forced because in exchange for something of value, it's automatically considered sex trafficking. And in terms of labor trafficking, it's that same force, fraud, or coercion, but used in terms of involuntary servitude. The one caveat I want to give about sex trafficking is if the person is 17 or younger, no one has to prove force, fraud, or coercion for it to be considered trafficking, because minors cannot consent to sell or exchange a commercial sex act. No such law exists right now, or caveat, I should say, for labor trafficking victims. But in the city of Philadelphia, for example, labor trafficking presents in restaurants such as like dishwashers, back of the house kind of staff. And they're coerced, forced, or frauded into doing this because of whatever they have that's been exploited by the trafficker. So that could look like an immigration status. That could look like a debt bondage or a debt that's like made up, right? That
Mm-hmm.
they have to pay back. And they use these threats of hurting someone that they love or themselves if they don't do these things. Um, and it happens in hair salons, particularly like braiding salons a lot, because they're hours and hours long appointments usually.
Uh-huh.
And they get people that have been not been able to be hired anywhere else. So say like someone with a criminal record or someone from another country or someone who is kind of insulated in a community from coming here from another country. So traffickers really target and exploit people's vulnerabilities, and anyone's vulnerable and everyone's vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Traffickers unfortunately are very intelligent, and they know how to pinpoint and identify someone's vulnerabilities very quickly.
You know, first let me say thank you for your patience with my ignorance, because my questions, I know so little, which is why I say it, it was so important to talk with you about this subject matter, because I know so little. I'm sure there are so many more of our family members who know just as little, if not less, than I do about this. And it, like you said, the numbers are, they've been growing. They've grown exponentially over time, and it's just a terrible, horrible thing that we're dealing with, and it's not discussed enough, not nearly enough. I it's interesting to hear you say these things, everything that you just shared with us when you're talking about how the trafficker imposes will upon other individuals. And it seems so, of course it's inhumane, but when I hear you say it, I'm thinking, oh wow, that I see how that can happen. I understand, but I don't think of it happening until you just said it, when you were talking about someone whose life, they're dealing with situations in life that are unfavorable, and those situations can be used against them. I wouldn't even think of it. I wouldn't even think of that, and you're so right that's how easy it is to happen in just everyday works of life, or it just amazes me. I have a question for you about some of the things we've seen on social media. We've seen like demonstrations on social media about ways that women are being targeted. I'm curious to know if there or how much truth there is to some of the demonstrations. Like one, for instance, was about uh, uh, a woman. I think there was a zip tie on a car. There have been like chemicals put on napkins and things of that nature. There are so many of them, that we've seen on social media. But I really am curious to know: is there any truth to any of these demonstrations that we've seen?
Absolutely not. A lot of times, and I think, I'm happy that you have me here so we can kind of talk about these things,
Mhm.
because a lot of times the media, social media, Hollywood portray trafficking as this like explosive kidnapping or trickery that happens, right, to strangers.
Mhm.
That's the least likely way someone is trafficked, by a stranger. 80% of trafficking victims knew their trafficker at the time they were trafficked. 40% of those traffickers were family members. If we can step back a little bit, because I think I should have clarified the exact definition before we talked, but remember I said force, fraud, or coercion always has to be present for it to be considered sex or labor trafficking,
Mhm.
unless it's a minor. Um, the way traffickers exploit people is exploiting their vulnerabilities, right?
Mhm.
Um, Strangers don't know our vulnerabilities. I could be walking down the street and no one would ever know what I've been through just by looking at me, right? Or you, or the next person, or him or her, right?
Sure.
There's a grooming stage, it's called. And pretty much traffickers will exploit someone's vulnerabilities, use those exploitations of the vulnerabilities to gain their trust, and then isolate them, whatever, right? They know they have no one to go to. They know they have no one, that they're not going to be believed. And we'll talk a little bit about that later, why certain populations are more likely to experience trafficking than others. And then they force them, coerce them, fraudulently get them to do things that makes the trafficker money. So we've been taught at a young age, all of us, no matter where we come from, stranger danger, right?
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
don't really interact with strangers much for them to know anything about us, for them to exploit us. So kidnappings and things like that, it's called brute force, and that's the least likely way someone's trafficked.
I just want to interrupt you for one moment because we have to take a short commercial break. But family, you already know, you hear how important this topic is. Stay with us, because when we come back, Natalie is going to continue what she was just explaining to us and share some more great information. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I remember this one moment. I ran to kind of the water edge, and my mom said something along the lines of like, now it's your turn. Take that first step. When I became a mom myself, I feel like my whole world changed. There's some light within her that makes me continue to do the climate science work that I do. You don't have to be a climate scientist to want to protect the earth. As moms, we care about our children and the environment they grow up in. And for Mia, I want you to know that I worked really hard to be a part of the change and to make it a better place for you.
Email from school about the incident today.
Scary.
Tell me about it. Did you have any idea that was going on?
None. I mean, you saw Derek at the game last night too. Did you have a clue?
No, but you know, teachers like me, parents, we don't always know as much as you guys do. Kids hear first about what's going on with other kids.
Half the time, it's rumors.
It can be hard to tell sometimes, but if you're ever concerned about a friend who's having trouble with alcohol, prescription drugs, bullying, violence, anything, you need to tell an adult. Mom or me, a teacher, coach, school counselor, someone you know and trust.
Dad, no kid is gonna tell an adult about that kind of stuff.
I get it, but if we don't know, we can't help. Speaking up about a problem, that's what helping a friend is all about.
You know, a lot of people say when you're going somewhere, you don't want to look back. But I beg to differ. For her to see her father celebrate his graduation, it's the best feeling in the world. I can't lie and say it was easy. But sometimes you just have to stop everything and take it in. I looked at everything in a different light. I realized it started with me going back and getting my high school diploma.
We're often influenced by what we see or hear on social media. Beware of disinformation campaigns targeting Black communities by using cultural issues to incite divisions, spread false information, and negatively influence public opinions. We're in this together, and together we can stay informed and empowered. Learn more at nbcit.org. This public service announcement is from the National Black Cultural Information Trust.
I'll be here to hear what's on your mind. Take this time to talk and get it right. You know I'll be there all your life. When you need me, I'll be by your side. By your side. And every day is a different day. Everything is in everything. Even when you think things can never ever be the same. Don't be scared of the world, I'll be here to stay. By your side. Even when your heart ain't listening, or your mind takes you a different way, towards a different path. All you gotta do is sit and ask. When you need me, I'll be by your side.
When the adults in a child's life talk early and often about the dangers of underage drinking, the message gets stronger every time.
I'll be by your side.
Talk. They hear you.
You're listening to WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD, independent Black media.
Hey there, family. Welcome back. You are tuned in to Love and Life on WURD, Progressive Black Talk Media, on air and online at wordradio.com. That's WURDradio.com. We've been talking with none other than Natalie Proud, who has given us some gems and is providing even more information about human trafficking and homelessness, the homelessness of our youth. Before the break, I had asked Natalie about some of these demonstrations that we've seen on social media, and Natalie was responding, and I had to rudely interrupt her. But now that we are back, Natalie, would you please continue?
Sure. So, as we were saying, a lot of the things that we see on social media and Hollywood are really not real portrayals of how trafficking happens. Trafficking does not happen by kidnapping someone typically. It can, it's just the least likely way it happens. And we were talking about stranger danger and how traffickers have to know us in order to exploit us because they have to know what makes us vulnerable. Strangers don't know that. And they also want to make sure that they don't get caught, right? So they want to make sure they're targeting people that have vulnerabilities, that oftentimes populations that feel that they don't have a voice, populations that aren't necessarily always taken serious when reporting a crime, and things of that nature. So if you do see any of those things on social media, you can check out Mythbusters by the Villanova Institute to address commercial sexual exploitation. Or reach out to us at Covenant House or the Philadelphia Anti-Trafficking Coalition. But in 13 years of working with victims and survivors of trafficking, I've never once seen their story recreated properly on social media or in Hollywood. It's years and months in the making prior to someone experiencing the first exploitation.
You're talking about a real predator.
Yes.
We're talking about real predators. So you mentioned the Anti-Trafficking Coalition. Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. So Covenant House is the chair organization for the Philadelphia Anti-Trafficking Coalition. It was established in 2001, and it's a network of anyone who's working with victims and survivors directly, anyone who's been a survivor or is a survivor, or anyone in the community, or school students, or anyone that is interested in anti-trafficking efforts. So since our inception, we have been successful in getting 4 laws passed in the state of Pennsylvania that protect survivors of trafficking, and most recently addressing the demand side of trafficking. And we will continue to do so. We have free trainings for the community. Obviously, we love donations, but we don't require or expect them. And those can be anywhere from Human Trafficking 101 to self-care for providers. So this work is very emotional. A lot of people think that because, we don't have a physical job, that our jobs aren't necessarily stressful. And honestly, physically, they're not very stressful. But as I mentioned earlier, when you have the power to make a decision that directly impacts someone's life, that's very stressful. And also because we're dealing with traumatic situations almost all the time, that brings up our own things may come up, and we may feel triggered, or whatever. We're not perfect. So we do offer and want to place an importance on people taking care of themselves that are doing this work, because we can't help others until we can help ourselves.
So 2 questions from what you just said. Where would we look to donate, number 1, and 2, to find additional information?
So any donations can be made online through our website. So one is covenanthousepa.org, and the other one is patcoalition.org. And there's both places on there to donate and find out more information.
Okay. So now, one thing that I've really been wondering, when we talk about human trafficking, well, again, we don't talk about it enough, but when we do, I'm always curious to know if there is a specific age group, or race or ethnic background that is targeted or more susceptible maybe to human trafficking.
That's a great question. So, like I said earlier, anyone can be trafficked, right? But there are populations that are more vulnerable or more at risk than other populations. So, the reason Covenant House serves so many young people experiencing trafficking or survivors of trafficking is because we're working with homeless and runaway youth. They all, three of those groups, have the same kind of vulnerabilities and risk factors. So, history of foster care, history in the criminal justice system, history of sexual abuse, physical abuse, history of not graduating or finishing school, being poor, right? Impoverished people, undocumented people, people that don't have English as a first language, people that identify as LGBTQIA+, people of color. And I'm going to get to those two populations in a second. Also, people with intellectual disabilities. So most homeless youth or most youth experiencing homelessness have about like 7 of those vulnerabilities, right? So they're also more at risk to be victims of trafficking. And I do want to mention that this following stat I'm about to say is like, after I've been doing this work all these years, it's still crazy to me. 40% of sex trafficking victims are Black women and girls. And when data or things are reported as Black women and girls, they do mean like US, like American. So if we can think about the millions of people that are trafficked every year for sex trafficking purposes, almost half are Black women and girls, which is insane. And, not for this issue to get in today, and by no means am I an expert, but just like the adultification of Black girls, right? The school to prison pipelines and the exploitation. And then I also talked about LGBTQIA+ populations. 60% of transgender young people have experienced being victims of trafficking. So again, we're seeing 2 populations that are often fetishized or being ashamed of, if that's what we're attracted to. The other 2 key components I want to talk about briefly is that those populations are less likely to go to the cops than other populations, which is why they're targeted, because traffickers and buyers and whoever is very smart, right? And they want to reduce the risks of themselves getting caught. And also less likely to be believed when they go to the cops about being a victim of a crime. Again, traffickers know this, and they prey on that. And I am not an expert on why those things occur, but they are true facts. And I'm sure we can all think about someone in our life who identifies that way, and we probably would be like, yeah, they wouldn't go to the cops because they're going to have such a bad experience.
Wow. So the next question that I'm about to ask you, there may be an obvious answer, but in the event there is not, we talk so much about women and our adult women and young women. When we talk about human trafficking, are men and young men at risk for human trafficking as well?
Yes. And I should have clarified that, so I'm glad you brought that up. Anyone can be sex trafficked: men, women, adults, children, transgender, non-binary, Black, white, Asian, like literally anybody, right? And also traffickers aren't only men, right? Women can be traffickers. Peers can be traffickers, friends can be traffickers. It's really just about that exploitation piece and using that in exchange for something of value or money. And honestly, anybody that's wanting to do that, unfortunately, can use the exploitation, extortion, coercion, force, and fraud to get someone to do something else.
So what would you say are some things females especially could look out for or should look out for to avoid becoming a victim?
So again, I don't want to just say like females, because everyone can be trafficked. But I do want to say that a lot of it's hard to avoid being trafficked when those populations are vulnerable to it, right? I think part of what is prevention would be key is if communities and people that are coming into contact with people would be more aware. So a lot of times people are trafficked or being trafficked, and they tell like 4 people and no one believes them, or no one knows what it is. So they just never can really get an opportunity to get out, even though they want to. And honestly, they're already in it when they realize they want to get out. It's not like something that like they slowly are like, okay, I'm getting into this, and I'll get out next week. Like, you know what I mean? It's once they're in, like, and it happened and they had no idea. And so that's why it's really important on the Philadelphia Anti-Trafficking Coalition that we have people like nurses and people that would come into contact with people. So similar to how people have done domestic violence awareness in terms of hospitals, like putting the number up, having a screening, right? The thing is with trafficking, the average age of entry, the first time someone is trafficked, is 12 to 13 years old. Oh, and so they're not the target audience for domestic violence prevention, right? And I do think that another way that we prevent this is educating 12 to 13 year olds about this. So there is programming specifically for middle school children that's like made by other children. And it's a curriculum that we can do in schools to give, that population doesn't always have the vocabulary that they need, right? It's this kind of, we always trust adults 100%. And like, honestly, we shouldn't be trusting adults 100%, because the people we see in the news, like the Jeffrey Epsteins and the R. Kellys, yes, we see them in the news, probably because they're rich, honestly, and other reasons. But like those aren't really what we're seeing in everyday life. And even the R. Kelly story, that he manipulated the parents into. There was, multiple dynamics of that where it affect generations of people, right? So, and honestly, if you watch the documentary on Netflix, Filthy Rich, about Epstein and his partner Maxwell, how they manipulated and exploited those victims, that's the most realistic portrayal of like the grooming stage that I've personally seen.
I did see that Netflix special. Before we go to break, and I'm glad, thank you for correcting me when I was asking specifically about females, because I just asked you if everyone was susceptible. But before we go to break, I'm curious to know, because you said a few times, like some of the scenarios that we see that are glamorized, if you will, by Hollywood are not the more common scenarios. When we come back from our break, would you share with us some more common scenarios that you see, or some situations with which you've had experience? Family, if you have just joined us, you are tuned in to Love and Life on WURD, Progressive Black Talk Media, on air and online at wordradio.com. That is WURDradio.com. We are talking with none other than Natalie Proud. She is sharing, oh my goodness, so much information with us, information for which I am eternally grateful. And I'm going to thank her on behalf of you too, family members, because I know this is information that we all need. As I was just explaining, we are about to take a short commercial break, but stay with us, please, because we will be right back.
I'll never forget the day I nearly died. I was a young journalist with a great career, starting a family. The only way we found out I had any kind of heart issue was when I went into sudden death. My coworkers sprung into action. They've recently been trained in life-saving CPR protocols developed by the American Heart Association. They're the ones that kept me alive until the medics came. They did many tests on me in the hospital after my cardiac arrest and created a treatment plan, all with research from the American Heart Association. I think unless you are a heart disease patient, you may not know how much work the American Heart Association does behind the scenes to save your life. Since my cardiac arrest, I've had 2 more children. I've watched all 3 of my children grow into adulthood. I'm going to cry now. Graduate from college. My daughter got married. I have grandchildren. And I'm still here.
Learn more about the American Heart Association's work at helpheart.org.
Imagine you on a deserted island all by yourself, or even being in a crowd of people yet still feeling alone. That's what being a victim of sexual assault can feel like. Victims of sexual assault are at an increased risk for developing depression, PTSD, substance abuse, eating disorders, and anxiety. Sexual assault can happen to anyone and is any unwanted sexual contact such as unwanted touching, fondling, groping, or even rape. No always means no, so speak up and speak out. It's on us to stop sexual assault.
Everyone loves a champion, someone whose performance puts them head and shoulders above the rest. But not all champions wear a medal or hoist a trophy. At the U.S. Center for Safe Sport, we see champions everywhere we look. In every sport, on every court, we're building a foundation to ensure all athletes are safe, supported, and strengthened. We believe abuse can be prevented by taking a hard look at how we coach, how we train, and how we interact after the last whistle. We have provided over 2 million safe sport trainings. At the U.S. Center for Safe Sport, ending abuse is not just our job. It's our promise.
The thing that drives me every day as a dad is him. Every day he's hungry for something. And there's this huge responsibility in making sure that he's a good person. I think the advice I would give is you don't need to know all the answers. It's okay to make mistakes. As long as it's coming from love, then it kind of starts to work itself out.
Hey world, I have a quick message. It's about safe driving. All right, let's go. Anytime you're driving, have the seatbelt buckled tight, both hands on the wheel and your phone out of sight. When not in your hand trying to text somebody back, because if you do, your car might get smacked. The moral of the story, just put your phone down. The people on the road will stay safe and sound. Put your phone down, put your phone down. People on the road will stay safe and sound. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Tanya Hopkins, aka The Food Griot, the host of Savory and Sweet, a new show about food, history, and culture. Savory and Sweet is a flavorful exploration of food marinated in the Black experience, seared with history and brazen culture. Each week, I'll fold in conversations that center food and drink at the intersection of business, health and well-being, entertainment, education, and innovation, while separating the facts from fiction on the sometimes surprising origins of what we eat and drink. So join me, the Food Griot, and special guests for Savory and Sweet, Food, History, and Culture every Sunday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. exclusively on WURD, Progressive Black Talk Media.
You're listening to WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD, Independent Black Media.
Hey there, family. Welcome back. You are tuned in to Love and Life on WURD, Progressive Black Talk Media. That's on air and online at wordradio.com. That is WURDradio.com. We are joined today by Natalie Proud, who has been sharing so much information with us. And before the break, I asked Natalie to share with us more commonly seen scenarios as it pertains to human trafficking. But before I do that, I want to make sure our family members are well aware if they want to donate to Covenant House for the efforts that you all are doing, for the amazing efforts that you all are doing. And I want to make sure that they also have the information for the Pennsylvania Coalition for Anti-Trafficking. So family, across your screen, you will see the website for both Covenant House and for the Pennsylvania Coalition for Anti-Trafficking. I'm going to let those rest for a moment while Natalie continues to answer the question about the different scenarios that you've seen. So Natalie, if you would.
Thank you. So one of the most common trafficking scenarios we personally see at Covenant House, because we're working with homeless youth, is something that's known as survival sex. So oftentimes people will prey on young people that are experiencing homelessness and, using force, fraud, or coercion into exchanging something of commercial sex for somewhere to stay, or something to eat, right? So remember when I said traffickers are really smart? I actually hate saying that because I hate to give them any props, but they will notice who doesn't get on the bus after school and go home with the rest of their peers. They notice, they wait at bus stops at night to see who's lingering, right? What young people are out after curfew. And then they use things that someone in survival mode would need, right? Oh, you look cold. Do you need a winter jacket? Oh, you look hungry. It looks like you haven't eaten. Do you want to eat something? And then they do that enough times till that person trusts them. And then they say, oh, well, we've known each other long enough. You can come back and stay at my house, right? You can have a warm bed to stay. You can have a safe, warm shower. And then they get there and, they coerce them into having sex with them in exchange for this place to stay or this something of value, right? Except, and I want to slam this home, when someone is under the age of 17, they don't have to be coerced, frauded, or forced for it to be considered trafficking, because they cannot consent to a commercial sex act in exchange for something of value. So at Covenant House, Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, we serve about 600 youth a year in shelter, and 20% or 1 in 5 youth that we work with, male, female, transgender, across all ages that we work with and across all races, have been self-reported victims of trafficking. Now we're asking those young people that question, those screening questions, within 3 days of us meeting them. So honestly, anecdotally, I would say the number's higher, but there's often a shame affiliated with being a trafficking victim or doing something that they felt that they had to do, and which they probably did have to do, right? So it's not on us to be you shouldn't have done that, whatever. The other way we see trafficking a lot with young people is, again, we were talking about commercial sex act in exchange for something so they can keep up with their peers, the latest sneakers, the glitteriest nails, the freshest hair, the freshest fits, all these kind of things, a cell phone bill that works. And again, we want to talk about how people are exploiting their vulnerabilities. Some stranger doesn't know if your cell phone bill is paid, right? But your basketball coach does, or the guy that works at the gas station, or the girl that does your nails, right? All these things can be used to exploit someone once they are known to someone. And that's why we just don't want to always have people thinking about strangers and things of that nature that are trafficking people. In terms of labor trafficking in Philadelphia, and labor trafficking, specifically in Philadelphia, this could look like people begging, young kids, especially boys, begging for money at bus stops, corners, traffic intersections, paying to pump your gas, right? Paying to bag your groceries to your car. If you look, there's always someone older around. There's always someone older that's watching, right? But they're never overtly in plain sight. In Philadelphia, also with young men, this looks like drug dealing. So there's no way a 12 or 13-year-old really knows how to deal drugs successfully, right? They have to be taught that by someone older than them. And they're the ones on the corners, right? You know why they're on the corners? Because cops are least likely to think that they're dealing drugs. And if they get caught, they probably just, hopefully get like a smack on the wrist and they can go back to, doing what they're doing. Whereas the person that's bringing all the drugs in or paying for the supply really isn't the person you're seeing in the forefront. This also looks like, again, we talk about restaurant workers, and in the more like rural or suburban parts of the state, that looks like migrant workers and farm workers. So that could be, I can get you into this country and you're going to owe me $10,000 for this passport, right? And then they get here and now all of a sudden they owe them $40,000 for that passport. And you can't leave the house or the workplace until you paid off this debt. And the debt's never ending, right? And again, we talk about populations that are less likely to be believed or less likely to go to the cops. Undocumented populations are one of those populations too.
I cannot thank you enough for all of the information that you have shared and are sharing with us. It still amazes me that we are in 2023 and we deal with so many of the issues that we are currently dealing with, and this is one of them. And it breaks my heart. It really does. I cannot thank you enough, and Covenant House and the PA Coalition for Anti-Trafficking for all that you do, all of the efforts that you know that you make, all the strides that you've made thus far and continue to make. Thank you as well for the I forgot to mention, it was the Safe Harbor bill. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you as well for that. Yeah, I know we're getting short on time. We have about a maybe 2 minutes left before we say goodbye to everybody. But could you just speak really quickly about the Safe Harbor bill?
So yes, I can. Prior to the Safe Harbor bill being passed in Pennsylvania, minors that were victims of trafficking were treated as criminals. So the saying that goes along with Safe Harbor is there's no such thing as a child prostitute. So up until Safe Harbor bill was passed, anyone that was a minor that was out, that was picked up for loitering or past curfew time, typically those are crimes associated with being trafficked, not always, right? Then they would be charged as a criminal. They could be charged as a prostitute. And up until Safe Harbor bill was passed, that was the law in Pennsylvania. But we were able to advocate, but it took 4 years for us to get that bill passed in Pennsylvania, which makes it that if anyone of a minor is picked up for any of the crimes most associated with trafficking, that they are kind of screened and seeing what's really going on, rather than being treated as a criminal and entering the criminal justice system. They're offered wraparound services, case management, social services, things of that nature. It also creates a fund to train state police from the restitution and fines that are gotten by traffickers. And also,
No. I'm sorry for interrupting that. No, I was saying that's
I'm
it.
sorry.
Oh,
I
that
thought
was
I was
amazing.
having
No.
technical difficulties.
Oh.
And it also allows for free tattoo removal. So unfortunately, again, we have to think of traffickers in the business of making money. They brand or tattoo people with their names or symbols. And oftentimes when someone is not involved with that anymore, they don't want that on their body, but it's a very long process and expensive. So it also offers free tattoo removal from participating tattoo parlors for those who wish to get that done. But there's still 12 states, I believe, in the country that don't have safe harbor laws in place for minors.
I am digesting all of this, and it just breaks my heart. But Natalie, once again, thank you. Just thank you so much for all that you do, all that you all are doing. Family, it's that time. It's the time that I dread so much. But as we wrap up tonight's episode, we extend our gratitude to you as you continue to support Love and Life, because we just love you to pieces and we want you to know that we do. Special thanks to our guest again, Natalie Proud, for sharing your time, your energy, your attention, the information, everything that you shared with us. We cannot thank you enough. Thank you to Niall Jacks, Tiffany Bacon, Donovan West, Jamira Perry, and the remainder of the WURD family. That was from me specifically. And family, I say this every single episode. We are all in this together, so be good to you, please, but be good to those around you. Okay? Have a great night. Have a great morning and have a great rest of your day. And be sure to join us at midnight, Sunday through Thursday, for another edition of Love and Life on WURD, Progressive Black Talk Media. See y'all later.
Stand with WURD Radio, Pennsylvania's only black-owned talk radio station. Join the movement to keep the conversations going and amplify the voice of the black community. Show your support. Start or renew your WURD membership today at WURDradio.com or call 215-425-7875.
You know, a lot of people say when you're going somewhere, you don't want to look back. But I beg to differ. For her to see her father celebrate his graduation, it's the best feeling in the world. I can't lie and say it was easy. But sometimes you just have to stop everything and take it in. I looked at everything in a different light. And I realized it started with me going back and getting my high school diploma.
Maybe you can make retirement happen. After all, you made her college years happen. Opening that education savings account when she was little. Spearheading a campus tour. And another, and another, and another, and another. Bam! Deciphering financial aid. She was like, what? Now she's like, you aced planning for college. Now get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
I'm Naheem Hines, professional football player for the Indianapolis Colts. Becoming a running back was no easy task for me, but it's nothing compared to what my amazing mom faces every day. My mom was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy when I was 14 years old, yet she's always there for me, every step of the way, despite her own battles. And the Muscular Dystrophy Association is there for my mom. At their 150 care centers across the U.S., MDA is the leading organization in research and care for kids and adults with muscular dystrophy, ALS, and related neuromuscular diseases. Their research is helping find cures and save lives. Watching my mom go through her daily struggles and the care she receives from MDA has made me determined to help find a cure for neuromuscular disease. That is why I support MDA, and that's why I'm so grateful to others who do too. Join me and learn more at helpmda.org today.
I remember this one moment. I ran to kind of the water edge, and my mom said something along the lines of like, now it's your turn. Take that first step. When I became a mom myself, I feel like my whole world changed. There's some light within her that makes me continue to do the climate science work that I do. You don't have to be a climate scientist to want to protect the earth. As moms, we care about our children and the environment they grow up in. And for Mia, I want you to know that I worked really hard to be a part of the change and to make it a better place for you.
Imagine you on a deserted island all by yourself, or even being in a crowd of people yet still feeling alone. That's what being a victim of sexual assault can feel like. Victims of sexual assault are at an increased risk for developing depression, PTSD, substance abuse, eating disorders, and anxiety. Sexual assault can happen to anyone and is any unwanted sexual contact such as unwanted touching, fondling, groping, or even rape. No always means no, so speak up and speak out. It's on us to stop sexual assault.
You're listening to WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD, independent black media. Lifting every voice till earth and heaven ring. This is WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD, Philadelphia. Black